The Shadowpine Pack lived by one absolute law: only a male born under the wolf moon could claim the Alpha throne. When Lena Cross held her newborn twin daughters beneath a blood moon, she didn't see a curse. She saw destiny. But her mate, Alpha Garrett Stone, saw only contamination. He didn't just reject them. He sentenced them to die in the frozen wasteland. She was cast into the killing frost, clutching 2 fading heartbeats, believing her story ended in snow. She was wrong. Her story was just beginning. Because in that frozen darkness, when even her packmates turned away, the Vampire King emerged from the storm with an offer that would reshape kingdoms. "Your Alpha threw away the future," he said. And everything changed. The pain of labor was nothing compared to the silence that shattered the room. Inside the Alpha's chamber of the Shadowpine Pack house, the air was suffocating, thick with the scent of cedar, blood, and something else. Something ancient that made the wolves uneasy. Lena Cross collapsed against the sweat-soaked pillows, her chest heaving as she clutched 2 small bundles wrapped in rough linen against her racing heart. She was destroyed. Her dark hair plastered against her pale face, her body trembling from hours of labor. But a fierce, primal love flooded through her veins, drowning out the exhaustion. "Let me see them." A cold voice cut through the room like a blade. Alpha Garrett Stone didn't rush to her side. He didn't kiss her forehead or praise her strength. He stalked into the chamber with the heavy, deliberate gait of a predator approaching wounded prey. His beta, Kale, stood rigid by the door, his jaw clenched, refusing to meet Lena's desperate eyes. Lena shifted weakly, offering a trembling smile despite the blood moon's red light bleeding through the window. "Garrett, they're perfect. Look at them." Garrett stopped at the edge of the bed. His eyes, cold gray, merciless, swept over the infants. He didn't touch them. He didn't soften. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring, and his lip curled back to expose teeth that were too sharp, too cruel. "I smell moon magic," Garrett said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Lunar essence. Vampire taint." He turned his head toward Alara, the pack midwife, who was backing into the corner, her weathered face white with terror. "What are they?" Alara's voice shook. "Girls, Alpha. 2 healthy baby girls." The silence that followed was crushing. Oppressive. Heavy enough to stop hearts. Lena's smile died. She pulled the infants closer, her arms tightening instinctively as her wolf screamed warnings inside her mind. "Garrett, they are our daughters. They're beautiful. This one, she has your eyes, and daughters." Garrett spat the word like venom. He turned his back on her, pacing toward the window where snow had begun to fall in heavy, ominous sheets. "I needed a son, Lena. The Blood Council is circling like vultures. The northern packs are testing our borders. I needed a male heir to secure the throne. I needed a warrior to carry my legacy." "They can be warriors," Lena argued, her voice cracking with desperation. "They have alpha blood. They'll be strong." Garrett spun around, his face twisted with rage and something darker. "Disgust. They're abominations. I can smell it on them: vampire essence, hybrid corruption. No wolf fire. Just weakness wrapped in flesh." He marched back to the bed, towering over her like a storm about to break. "You have failed me, Lena. 3 years I've waited. 3 years watching other alphas sneer at me because I have no heir. And now you give me this: 2 defective females. 2 curses born under a blood moon. They are your flesh and blood." Lena screamed, tears streaming down her face as the babies began to wail, thin, piercing cries that seemed to enrage Garrett further. "Get them out." Garrett snarled. Lena froze, her blood turning to ice. "What?" "I said get them out. And take yourself with them." Garrett's eyes went dead, empty of everything except cold judgment. He looked at Kale. "Escort her to the boundary. She is no longer Luna of Shadowpine. Our mate bond is severed." The pain was instantaneous. Brutal. It felt like a jagged hook tearing through the center of her soul, ripping out everything that connected her to him, to the pack, to her identity. Lena gasped, doubling over as the mystical bond between her and Garrett snapped. She clutched the screaming infants tighter, feeling their terror mixing with her own. Garrett didn't even flinch. He had already shut her out completely. "Garrett, please," Lena begged, not for herself, never for herself, but for the tiny lives in her arms. "It's a blizzard outside. Below freezing. They're newborns. You can't. They'll die within the hour." Garrett looked at her with eyes carved from stone. "Then nature will correct the mistake you brought into this world. If they're strong, they'll survive. If they're weak." He smiled, and it was the cruelest thing she'd ever seen. "Let the winter take them." He gestured sharply to Kale. "Remove her. Now. Before I finish this myself and stop that goddamned crying." Kale moved forward, his face a mask of barely contained horror. But he obeyed. No one defied Alpha Garrett Stone. Not if they wanted to live. "I'm sorry, Lena," Kale whispered as his hand closed around her arm. "Please. Don't fight. Just come." Lena was hauled from the bed, still wearing nothing but her thin birthing gown, her feet bare against the cold stone floor. She scrambled to maintain her grip on her daughters, wrapping her trembling arms around them like a shield made of desperation. She was dragged through the packhouse corridors, past wolves she had led, wolves she had healed, wolves she had called family. They all turned away. Every single one. Eyes averted. Mouths sealed shut. The Alpha's word was absolute law. The heavy oak doors were thrown open, and the winter wind struck her like a physical blow, stealing her breath, freezing the tears on her cheeks. Snow swirled in violent eddies, and the temperature drop was immediate, vicious. "Go," Kale said, his voice thick with grief as he pushed her past the boundary line, the invisible barrier that marked pack territory from the wild. He threw a threadbare blanket after her, a pathetic shield against the death waiting in the darkness. "Run, Lena. Head toward the human settlements. Maybe they'll take you in." The doors slammed shut behind her. The lock clicked. Lena stood in the knee-deep snow, the wind howling around her like a chorus of dying wolves, and looked down at the two tiny faces already turning blue from the cold. She had nothing. No shelter. No warmth. No future. Only two daughters the world had deemed worthless. And a mother's love that refused to let them die. Lena stumbled through the snow drifts, her legs moving on pure instinct because her mind had already begun to shut down. She couldn't feel her feet anymore. The thin blanket Kale had thrown her was soaked through, frozen stiff against her chest where she pressed the twins. Each breath burned her lungs like inhaling glass shards. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, skeletal trees clawing at the blood moon, shadows thick as oil, visibility reduced to mere feet by the driving snow. The babies had stopped crying 10 minutes ago. Maybe 20. Time had lost all meaning in the white hell surrounding her. That silence, that terrible, absolute silence, terrified her more than their earlier wails ever had. Crying meant life. Crying meant fighting. Silence meant slipping away. "Stay with me," Lena whispered through chattering teeth, her voice swallowed by the howling wind. "Please. Stay with me." Her foot caught on a buried root, and she went down hard, twisting at the last second to take the impact on her shoulder rather than the infant's. Pain exploded through her body, but she didn't make a sound. Couldn't spare the breath. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't obey. The cold had seeped too deep, shutting down systems, prioritizing her core over her limbs. Lena crawled to the nearest tree and collapsed against it, pulling the blanket tighter around the twins. Their lips were blue. Their tiny chests barely rising. She was watching them die. Watching herself fail at the one thing that mattered. The edges of her vision began to blur, darkening like a vignette closing in. Hypothermia's final gift, the hallucinations before the end. She saw her mother's face materialize in the swirling snow, young and beautiful and heartbroken. Her mother, who had also been Omega. Who had also failed to produce the sons her Alpha demanded. Who had been cast out and never seen again. I'm sorry, Mama, Lena thought. I tried. One of the babies stirred weakly in her arms. Lena looked down, and her breath caught. The infant's eyes had opened, not the cloudy blue of newborns, but bright, impossible silver, glowing with their own internal light like twin moons. The other baby's eyes fluttered open a heartbeat later, and they were gold, molten gold ringed with crimson fire. I'm seeing things, Lena whispered, her voice barely audible. This is death. I'm dying. And then the wind stopped. Not gradually. Not a natural lull in the storm. It ceased instantly, as if someone had given a command and nature itself had obeyed. The snow that had been whipping horizontally fell straight down in perfect, eerie silence. The trees stopped their groaning. Even the distant sounds of nocturnal animals vanished. The forest held its breath. Lena's dying wolf stirred deep in her soul, whimpering a warning she couldn't process. Predator. Apex predator. Footsteps approached through the snow, but they made no sound. No crunch of ice. No disturbance of powder. Like a ghost walking above the surface of the world. A shadow separated from the darkness between the trees, tall, impossibly tall, moving with fluid grace that seemed almost too deliberate to be human. The figure stepped into the blood moon's light, and Lena's heart stuttered. He was devastatingly beautiful in the way ancient statues were beautiful, cold, perfect, and human. Platinum hair fell to his shoulders, catching the moonlight and reflecting it like spun silver. He wore a long black coat with intricate silver embroidery that seemed to move in patterns she couldn't quite follow, dragons coiling, stars falling, symbols from forgotten languages. And on his head sat a crown of blackened metal, Gothic spires reaching upward like the architecture of nightmares, delicate yet brutal. A vampire. Not just any vampire. The aura radiating from him was suffocating, ancient, tasting of blood and power that had witnessed empires rise and fall. Lena tried to pull the babies closer, but her arms had gone numb. She could only stare as he approached with measured steps, his crimson eyes, burning liquid crimson, fixed on her with an intensity that should have killed her. He stopped 5 feet away, and the impossible silence stretched between them. Then he moved closer, his supernatural speed restrained, controlled, as if approaching a wounded animal he didn't want to startle further. He knelt in the snow beside her, and up close she could see he wasn't breathing. Didn't need to. His skin was pale as fresh snow, flawless, ageless. Please, Lena croaked, the only word she could manage. Kill me if you must, but take them. Human orphanage. Please. The vampire didn't respond immediately. He reached out with a gloved hand, black leather, expensive, and gently pulled back the frozen blanket from the twins. His eyes narrowed as he studied them, and for a long moment he was utterly still. Then he inhaled deeply, something primal and seeking in the gesture. His expression shifted. Curiosity became something else. Something that looked almost like awe. He carefully lifted the edge of the tiny gowns the babies wore, revealing their shoulders. On one infant, a birthmark shaped like a perfect crescent moon. On the other, a sun symbol with rays extending outward. The vampire's hand trembled barely, but it trembled. Impossible, he murmured, his voice like velvet wrapped around steel, carrying an accent that belonged to centuries past. The mark of convergence. After 3,000 years. He looked up at Lena, those crimson eyes boring into her with such intensity she felt it in her bones. Who is the father? Alpha Garrett Stone, Lena managed. He threw us out. Because they're girls. Something dark and terrible crossed the vampire's face. The temperature around them dropped another 10 degrees, frost spreading across the tree bark in intricate patterns. He threw his own blood into the storm, the vampire said softly, his voice carrying more menace in its quietness than any shout. Because they were born female. Yes. The vampire stood slowly, looking back toward where Shadowpine territory lay hidden in the darkness. Wolves, he said, disgust dripping from the word. Always so obsessed with brute strength that you fail to recognize true power when it is born in your arms. He turned back to Lena and extended his hand, an invitation, not a command. When he spoke, there was something almost gentle beneath the ancient authority. My name is Damon. King Damon of the Night Court, sovereign of the Obsidian Realm. He paused, letting the weight of his titles settle. I can hear their hearts slowing. They have perhaps 5 minutes of life remaining. You have less. Lena stared at his outstretched hand, at the impossible choice being offered. Her wolf should be screaming warnings. Vampires and werewolves were mortal enemies, had been for millennia. But her wolf was too weak to protest, and her daughters were dying. Why? She whispered. Why would you save us? Damon's expression softened imperceptibly, and he smiled, not warm, but not predatory either. It was the smile of a king who had just discovered something infinitely precious that had been thrown away like garbage. Because, Lena Cross, your mate is a fool who threw away the future of both our kingdoms. These children are not just wolves. His eyes flashed with crimson fire. They bear the mark of convergence, the prophecy that foretold hybrid rulers who would unite eternal enemies. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a command that resonated in her dying bones. Come with me. I will give you warmth. I will give you vengeance. And I will raise your daughters to be queens that will make your alpha bow. Lena looked at the twins, their impossible eyes already dimming, their tiny bodies going still. She looked at Damon's hand, steady and certain in a world that had just proven how fragile certainty could be. She reached up with frozen fingers and placed her hand in his. His grip was cold but strong, impossibly gentle as he pulled her into his arms, cradling both her and the infants as if they weighed nothing at all. Sleep now, Lena, he whispered as he turned toward the darkness. The storm is over. And as consciousness finally fled, Lena's last thought was that she had traded one king for another, but this one had bothered to see her daughters as something more than a mistake. Lena woke to warmth, true, bone-deep warmth she'd never known in her life. Silk sheets slid against her skin like water, impossibly soft, and a fireplace crackled nearby with logs that smelled of cedar and something sweet she couldn't name. The bed beneath her was enormous, larger than her entire room back at the pack house. For a disoriented moment, she thought she'd died, and this was some afterlife her mother's stories had never mentioned. Then memory crashed back. The snow. The dying. The vampire king. The babies. Lena bolted upright, her heart hammering. She was wearing a white nightgown of fine linen, clean and warm, but her daughters, where were her daughters? She threw herself from the bed and ran to the door, expecting it to be locked, expecting to be a prisoner. But the handle turned easily. She burst into a hallway of black marble and soaring ceilings, lined with portraits of severe, pale figures whose eyes seemed to follow her movement. The corridor stretched endlessly in both directions, lit by crystal sconces that held flames without consuming candles. Then she heard it, soft cooing, the gentle sound of contentment. She followed it like a lifeline, her bare feet slapping against cold stone, until she reached massive double doors already standing ajar. The nursery beyond stole her breath. Gold cribs stood on either side of the room, their bars intricately carved with symbols she didn't recognize. Ancient tapestries hung on the walls, depicting battles between wolves and vampires, fangs against claws, blood and moonlight and carnage rendered in exquisite detail. But what made her freeze in the doorway was the figure sitting in a high-backed velvet chair at the room's center. King Damon, the immortal sovereign who had slaughtered entire packs in the legends wolves told their children, was bottle-feeding both of her daughters simultaneously. His platinum hair caught the firelight as he adjusted his hold with practiced ease, and he was humming a lullaby in a language that sounded older than memory. He looked up as she entered, no embarrassment in his crimson eyes. "They're hungry," he said simply. "Constantly." Lena approached on trembling legs, her maternal instinct warring with primal fear. Damon shifted slightly, offering her one of the infants, the one with dark hair like Lena's own. She took her daughter carefully, cradling the warm weight against her chest, and tears burned her eyes when the baby's silver eyes opened and focused on her face. "You've been asleep for 3 days," Damon said, continuing to feed the other twin with surprising gentleness. "Your body was nearly frozen solid. Dr. Alara worked around the clock to bring you back." A woman in white robes emerged from the shadows, tall, elegant, with kind eyes that held centuries of knowledge. "Your daughters are perfect," Alara said, her voice warm. "Extraordinary, in fact." She moved to an ornate desk and retrieved an ancient scroll, yellowed with age, covered in symbols and illustrations that seemed to shimmer in the firelight. "This," Alara said, unrolling it carefully, "is the prophecy of convergence. Written 3,000 years ago by the last oracle of the blood moon." Lena stared at the drawings, 2 infants marked with celestial symbols, surrounded by wolves and vampires bowing in equal measure. "I don't understand." "Your daughters are hybrid," Damon said, his voice quiet but certain. "Born when dormant vampire blood in your lineage merged with your mate's alpha genetics. They'll have wolf-shifting abilities combined with vampire speed and longevity. They'll walk in sunlight without burning. They'll resist silver without weakening." He paused, his eyes glowing brighter. "They're the biological impossibility that legends promised, the bridge between our species." "But I'm just Omega," Lena whispered. "My family line is nothing." "Your family line carries ancient vampire blood," Alara interrupted gently. "Dormant for generations, but there. Your mate smelled something foreign on them and his primitive instincts interpreted it as weakness. He threw away the only thing that could have made Shadowpine untouchable." Lena looked down at the baby in her arms, at those impossible silver eyes that saw too much. "Why tell me this? Why not just take them and use them however you want?" Damon stood slowly, cradling the second twin. He approached Lena and carefully placed the child in her other arm, so she held both daughters against her heart. His hands lingered for just a moment, steadying her. "Because children need their mother," he said softly. "And I need a queen who understands both worlds." His crimson eyes held hers with an intensity that should have terrified her but didn't. "Stay here, Lena Cross. Let me train them. When they come of age, we'll return to Shadowpine together. You'll reclaim your throne. They'll inherit both kingdoms." Lena looked at her daughters, these impossible, prophesied beings who'd been condemned for being born female. She looked at Damon, who saw them as salvation rather than curse. "You were told you were worthless," Damon said, his voice carrying the weight of a vow. "I'm telling you that you're the mother of legends." The throne room of the Obsidian Palace was a cathedral of shadows and crimson light. Hundreds of vampires, ancient nobility with eyes that had witnessed empires crumble, stood in rigid formation along marble columns that stretched toward a ceiling lost in darkness. At the room's heart, beneath a chandelier of black crystal, Lena Cross stood alone in a gown of midnight blue and silver. The color was deliberate, Damon had explained, not quite vampire black, not quite wolf gray. Transitional. A bridge between worlds. Damon sat on his throne of obsidian and bone, his crown catching the firelight as he surveyed his court. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 3 millennia. "I claim Lena Cross as queen consort of the Night Court. Her daughters, Sarah and Luna, I claim as my heirs and successors." The silence that followed was broken by a vampire lord stepping forward, his face contorted with aristocratic rage. "Your Majesty, they are mongrels. Half-breeds born of wolf and vampire, an abomination against pure bloodlines. You insult every noble house by—" The temperature in the throne room plummeted. Frost spread across the floor in geometric patterns. Damon stood slowly, and the sheer force of his presence drove every vampire in the room to their knees. All except Lena, who remained standing, watching him unleash the full weight of his ancient power. "I am king by conquest and blood," Damon said, his voice soft as falling snow and twice as deadly. I decide what strengthens this court. I decide what weakens it. His crimson eyes blazed. These children fulfill a prophecy older than your oldest ancestor. They are the convergence, the bridge that will end our eternal war. He let the silence stretch, suffocating. Anyone who harms them answers to me. And I promise you, my justice will be creative. The objecting lord bowed his head, trembling. Daemon turned to Lena and descended the dais, offering his hand. Will you accept this crown, Lena Cross? Will you stand beside me as queen? Lena hesitated. She looked across the room where Alara stood holding her sleeping daughters, their impossible eyes closed, their small chests rising and falling with life Garrett had tried to steal. She thought of his rejection, his cruelty, his absolute certainty that she was worthless. I accept, Lena said, her voice steady and clear. But on one condition. Daemon's expression shifted to intrigue. Name it. When we return to Shadowpine, I judge Garrett. Not you. Not my daughters. Me. A slow, predatory smile spread across Daemon's face, approval mixed with something darker. Agreed. A queen should have her vengeance. He placed a crown of silver and moonstone on her head, then raised her hand and kissed her knuckles. Welcome to eternity, my queen. The years that followed blurred together like pages of an illuminated manuscript, each one more vibrant than the last. In the first 5 years, Lena shed her omega skin like a serpent. She learned vampire politics from Daemon's counsel, power is patient. He taught her during late-night strategy sessions. Wolves strike fast and brutal. Vampires strike last and eternal. The twins began training in combat, languages, and the subtle magic that flowed through their hybrid blood. Sarah discovered she could move objects with her mind, making toys dance through the air. Luna could outrun vampire younglings twice her age. By year 10, Lena had transformed into someone unrecognizable. The vampire environment preserved her youth while she learned to fight with sword and strategy, to broker treaties and wage psychological warfare. The twins developed distinct personalities. Sarah became the intellectual, absorbing diplomatic nuance and ancient texts. Luna became the warrior, all instinct and devastating grace. When a vampire lord challenged Daemon's choice of heirs, 10-year-old Luna defeated his champion in ritual combat. The court learned quickly, the hybrids were not to be underestimated. The teenage years brought power that made even ancient vampires nervous. Sarah could read surface thoughts and project illusions that felt real enough to taste. Luna could partially shift, claws extending, fangs descending, eyes blazing gold, without losing her human form. Lena took her place on Daemon's council, and what had started as mutual respect between king and queen deepened into something neither had expected. After she brokered a treaty that had seemed impossible, Daemon found her alone in the war room and kissed her gentle, reverent, inevitable. "You've become the queen I needed," he whispered against her lips. By year 20, the twins had mastered abilities that belonged in legends. Sarah could create force fields and manipulate emotions with surgical precision. Luna could shift into a pure white wolf larger than any natural werewolf, moving with vampire speed that made her a blur of death. Meanwhile, reports from Shadowpine told a different story. Garrett's pack was collapsing. Without a Luna to maintain social cohesion, wolves miscarried, pups sickened, territory shrank. Neighboring packs circled like vultures. Garrett grew desperate, paranoid, cruel. On the morning of the twins' 20th birthday, Lena stood in the war room studying a map of Shadowpine territory. She heard Daemon's silent approach, felt his presence at her back. "You're ready," he said quietly, lifting his crown from his head and placing it on hers, a gesture of absolute trust. "Let's go remind your former mate what real power looks like." Lena looked at her reflection in the window glass, no longer the broken woman cast into snow, but a queen who commanded both fang and claw. She smiled, and it was sharp as silver. "Let's." Garrett Stone paced his throne room like a caged animal, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space that felt too large, too empty. 20 years had carved deep lines into his face, turned his hair iron gray at the temples, and left his hands with a tremor he couldn't quite control. The pack house around him showed similar decay, peeling paint on walls that had once gleamed, fireplaces cold and dark to conserve dwindling wood supplies, the scent of prosperity replaced by something closer to desperation. Cale entered without knocking, his face grim. Alpha Greaves from Northern Ridge raided our eastern hunting grounds again, took down 3 elk and marked the territory as his own. Garrett slammed his fist against the arm of his throne, the wood cracking under the impact. I am still Alpha. Where are my warriors? Why aren't they defending our borders? Morale is low, Alpha. Cale's voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes held years of accumulated grief. Ever since Lena was banished. Don't speak her name. Garrett snarled, his eyes flashing amber. She was weak. She failed the pack by producing defective offspring. I did what was necessary. You failed the pack. The voice came from the shadows near the cold fireplace. Elder Mara stepped forward, 90 years old but unbowed, her white hair braided with the tokens of 3 alpha reigns. A Luna is pack cohesion, Garrett. The heart that keeps the body alive. You severed the heart and now wonder why everything is dying. Garrett spun on her, his alpha aura flaring weakly. You question me? You dare. I'm 90 years old, Mara interrupted, unafraid. I've served 3 alphas. You're the first to banish a Luna and live to regret it. She gestured to the room, to the pack house falling apart around them. Look at what your pride has cost us. The evidence was undeniable. Pregnant she-wolves miscarried at rates that defied nature. Pups were born smaller, weaker, more susceptible to sickness that should have been nothing. Wolves were leaving quietly at first, then in families, seeking other packs, other alphas, other futures. The Gamma wolves who remained refused to submit fully, the pack hierarchy fracturing like ice under spring thaw. And Garrett himself bore the deepest wound. The rejected mate bond had left a scar on his soul so profound that no female would accept him. He was an alpha without a Luna, a king without a queen, and every wolf could smell the wrongness on him. Cale cleared his throat. There may be a solution. The Vampire King, Daemon of the Obsidian Realm, commands massive military force and resources. If we petition for an alliance, ask a leech for help? Garrett's voice dripped with disgust. I'd rather watch this pack burn. Then that's exactly what you'll do, Cale said quietly. Watch it burn. Because in 5 years, maybe less, there won't be a Shadowpine pack. Northern Ridge and the Eastern Territories will carve us up like a kill, and our name will be forgotten. The silence that followed was suffocating. Garrett looked around his throne room, at the empty seats where his council should sit, at the cold fireplaces, at the single worn banner hanging where dozens should have been displayed. He saw his future, alone, powerless, the last alpha of a dead pack. Send the petition, he said finally, the words tasting like ash. Arrange a summit ball. If I must deal with vampires to save what's left of this pack, so be it. Cale produced the formal document he'd already prepared, knowing this moment would come. Garrett signed with a shaking hand, then pressed his seal into hot wax, the Shadowpine crust, a howling wolf beneath twin moons. As the wax cooled, Elder Mara reached out and touched the petition with one gnarled finger. Her eyes went distant, milky white, the prophetic sight that came to wolves who lived long enough. This will bring your past home to roost, Alpha. Mark my words. Garrett waved her away dismissively. My past is buried in snow. Dead and forgotten. Mara's eyes cleared, fixing on him with terrible certainty. Nothing stays buried forever, Garrett Stone. Especially not the things you tried to kill. The Raven was dispatched that evening, carrying the sealed petition west toward the Obsidian Palace. Garrett watched it disappear into the twilight and told himself he'd made the right choice. He had no idea he'd just invited his doom to dinner. The raven arrived at dawn, its black wings cutting through the perpetual twilight that shrouded the obsidian palace. By midday, Daemon sat on his throne with Garrett's petition spread before him, the assembled vampire court standing in perfect formation along the marble colonnade. Lena occupied the throne beside his equal height, equal prominence, the queen consort seat she'd earned over 2 decades of rule. Flanking them on either side stood Sarah and Luna in formal court dress, their presence a silent declaration of power. Daemon read the petition aloud, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. To His Immortal Majesty, King Daemon of the Night Court. Shadowpine Pact humbly requests military alliance, offers trade agreements, seeks the wisdom of immortal counsel. The desperation bled through every carefully chosen word, the formal language barely masking the plea beneath. Laughter rippled through the vampire nobility. "The wolves are finally begging," one lord said with undisguised satisfaction. Another voice, more cautious, "It could be a trap, Your Majesty. Wolves are treacherous." Lena said nothing. Her expression remained perfectly unreadable, carved from the same marble as the palace itself. But her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the arm of her throne. Daemon turned to her, his crimson eyes holding hers. "What is my queen counsel?" "Accept," Lena said, her voice clear and commanding. "Attend. With full royal escort." "They'll recognize you," Daemon said quietly, though everyone in the room could hear. "That's the point." Lena's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Let me walk into that ballroom as what I've become, not what I was." Sarah stepped forward, her silver eyes glowing with barely contained anticipation. "Let us introduce ourselves as your heirs, Father Daemon. Let them see what they discarded." Luna grinned, predatory and eager. "I want to see his face when he realizes we're alive. When he understands what he threw away." Daemon stood slowly, and the court fell into absolute silence. "Then we shall give Shadowpine Pact the alliance they requested." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Just not the one they expected." He gestured to his scribe, who appeared from the shadows with parchment and quill already prepared. "Compose our response. King Daemon of the Night Court accepts Alpha Stone's invitation. He will attend with Queen Consort Lena Cross and the Princesses Sarah and Luna Daemon Cross." "He'll know my name," Lena said softly. "Good." Daemon's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Let him spend the weeks before our arrival wondering if it's truly you. Let him lose sleep. Let him spiral into paranoia and doubt." The preparation began immediately. Lena chose a gown of midnight black with silver embroidery forming constellations across the fabric, vampire court colors, but the wolf moon prominent at her heart. Sarah and Luna were fitted for complementary dresses, Sarah in pure white that made her look like moonlight given form, Luna in crimson that matched the blood moon of their birth. Daemon ordered 50 vampire guards in ceremonial armor, their weapons polished to mirror brightness. The message was unmistakable. This was not a diplomatic visit. This was a reckoning dressed in silk and steel. The night before their departure, Lena stood before a full-length mirror in her chambers. The woman reflected back bore no resemblance to the broken, barefoot Omega who'd been cast into the snow. This woman wore power like a second skin, her crown sitting naturally on dark hair swept into an elegant twist, her eyes holding the cold certainty of someone who had died and been reborn as something far more dangerous. Daemon appeared in the mirror behind her, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. "Nervous?" "Excited," Lena corrected, meeting his eyes in the reflection. "I've waited 20 years for this." His fingers tightened gently. "Then let's not keep destiny waiting any longer." Outside, the vampire guard assembled in perfect formation, their armor catching the eternal twilight. The carriages stood ready, black as midnight and ornate as funeral processions. Inside the palace, Sarah and Luna made final preparations, their hybrid power crackling in the air like approaching lightning. Shadowpine had invited the Vampire King to save them. They had no idea they'd invited their judgment. The Shadow Pine Pack house ballroom had been decorated with desperate care. Fresh garlands hung from rafters to hide peeling paint. Candles blazed in every sconce to mask the cold that seeped through cracked windows, and tables groaned under food spreads that looked generous until you noticed the meat's poor quality. Game was scarce, and it showed. Wolves filled the space in their finest clothing, but the fabrics were outdated, worn at the seams, carrying the faint scent of mothballs and hope. Garrett Stone stood at the head of the grand staircase in full alpha regalia, fur cloak, ceremonial belt, crown of antlers, and wolf teeth that suddenly felt too heavy on his graying head. Beside him stood Elena, his beta female companion, though not his mate. The bond scar on his soul prevented that, leaving him perpetually incomplete. She looked terrified to be there. Cale approached, his face tight with tension. The vampire delegation should arrive within the hour alpha. Remember, Garrett said, gripping his wine glass with shaking hands he tried to hide, show respect, but maintain dominance. We're equals entering negotiation. Alpha, Cale said carefully, the queen consort's name in the acceptance letter. It's a common name, Garrett snapped. Coincidence. Nothing more. But his hand trembled harder around the glass. The ballroom doors didn't open. They exploded inward with psychic force that sent them crashing against the walls. The music stopped instantly, instruments falling silent mid-note. Every wolf in the room froze, their instincts screaming a single message: apex predator. An impossible wind swept through despite the calm night outside, extinguishing half the candles and dropping the temperature 20 degrees. A figure appeared in the doorway, tall, severe, dressed in black ceremonial robes. Damon's herald slammed his ornate staff against the marble floor 3 times. Boom, boom, boom. The sound reverberated in every wolf's chest like a second heartbeat. Presenting his immortal majesty, King Damon of the Night Court, sovereign of the Obsidian Realm, victor of the Blood Moon Wars. Damon entered and the room forgot how to breathe. He wore a black suit that cost more than Shadowpine's annual trade income, cut to perfection, every line speaking of power consolidated over millennia. His crown caught the candlelight, Gothic spires of blackened metal rising like a cathedral of nightmares. Silver hair fell to his shoulders, reflecting light like spun moonbeams, making him look less like a man and more like a force of nature given form. His presence was suffocating. Absolute. The vampire aura that radiated from him overrode every pack instinct in the room. Wolves began dropping to their knees involuntarily, not out of respect, but because their bodies recognized a predator so far above them in the hierarchy that submission was biological imperative. Garrett tried to stand firm, locking his knees, but they buckled slightly. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The herald's voice rang out again, and this time it carried something that made Garrett's heart stop. Her Majesty, Queen Consort Lena Crossdamon, Lady of the Moonfire Court. The collective gasp was audible. Heads whipped toward the doorway. Garrett stumbled forward, gripping the staircase railing. Lena entered. She was transformed beyond recognition, yet unmistakably, impossibly herself. The broken, barefoot woman cast into the snow had become something else entirely, something regal, terrifying, and breathtaking. Her gown was midnight black, with silver embroidery forming wolf constellations across the fabric, the wolf moon prominent over her heart. A crown of diamonds and moonstones sat on her dark hair, delicate but with edges sharp enough to draw blood. She moved with the bearing of someone who had commanded armies, brokered treaties, ruled kingdoms. Her eyes found Garrett's across the room, cold, assessing, utterly unafraid. She didn't acknowledge him. She looked through him, as if he were furniture. Decoration. Nothing. Lena. Garrett's voice cracked, strangled. You're dead. The snow, the cold, you couldn't have. Lena's voice carried to every corner of the ballroom, clear as crystal, calm as still water. I was reborn. The herald wasn't finished. His staff slammed down again. Presenting the princesses of convergence, heirs to the United Realms. Princess Sarah crossed Damon. Princess Luna crossed Damon. The twins entered in perfect synchronization, and the room's atmosphere shifted from tension to raw terror. Sarah wore white that seemed to glow with its own luminescence, her dark hair cascading down her back, silver eyes glowing like twin moons. Luna wore crimson that matched the blood moon of their birth, platinum blonde hair unusual for any wolf, golden eyes ringed with crimson fire. On Sarah's bare shoulder, visible above her gown's neckline, was a crescent moon birthmark. On Luna's collarbone, a sun symbol. The hybrid aura that rolled off them hit the assembled wolves like a tidal wave. Every single wolf in the room, guards, nobles, servants, Kale, even Elena, was forced to bare their necks in submission. It wasn't voluntary. It was biological imperative overriding conscious thought. Even Garrett couldn't fight it. His body betrayed him, his neck tilting involuntarily to expose his throat to superior predators. His wolf recognized them instantly. His daughters. But they smelled wrong, vampire essence woven through alpha genetics, creating something his primitive instincts couldn't categorize. Something beyond. No, Garrett whispered, his mind fracturing. No, they were infants. They died. They had to die. Alpha, stand, Kale hissed urgently beside him. You must stand. But Garrett's legs wouldn't obey. The hybrid alpha aura was absolute, undeniable, crushing. Damon ascended the stairs with deliberate slowness, savoring every second of Garrett's submission. He stopped 3 steps below the alpha, forcing Garrett to look down at the superior predator occupying the inferior position, a strategic humiliation that wasn't lost on anyone watching. Alpha Stone, Damon said, his voice smooth as silk and cold as winter. Your hospitality is noted. Though I must say, your pack house has seen better decades. The insult was delivered with a smile that didn't reach his crimson eyes. Lena followed, stopping beside Damon, which put her eye level with Garrett from her position on the stairs. She studied him like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. Hello, Garrett, she said softly. It's been 20 years. You look tired. No warmth. No anger. Just clinical observation of his decline. Garrett found his voice, though it came out strangled and desperate. How? The blizzard, you had no shelter, no supplies. Newborns can't survive. You're right, Lena interrupted. We couldn't survive. Alone. She gestured to Damon with casual intimacy. Fortunately, true leaders recognize value. Unlike you. The twins moved to flank their parents, forming an intimidating family unit that radiated unified power. Luna spoke first, her voice carrying the warrior's directness that came from never having been taught to submit. Hello, father, she said, the word dripping with irony. Remember us? The runts you sentenced to death. Sarah's voice followed, intellectual cruelty wrapped in silk. You smelled weakness on us that night. Your primitive wolf senses couldn't comprehend hybrid superiority, so you interpreted evolution as defect. The pack watched in stunned, horrified silence. Elder Mara stepped forward from the crowd, moving slowly but with purpose. She bowed deeply to Lena, her ancient bones creaking. Welcome home, Luna. Garrett spun on her, his control finally snapping. She is not Luna. She was banished. I am Alpha here. Mara straightened, her eyes holding the weight of 9 decades. You were Alpha, Garrett Stone. Past tense. Luna raised one hand lazily, examining her fingers. Before the entire assembly, her fingernails extended into claws, diamond hard, gleaming, a partial shift that should have been impossible in human form. She studied them with casual interest, as if discovering something mildly amusing. Should we show them, sister? Luna asked, her voice carrying dangerous promise. Or make them wait? Sarah smiled, and it was the smile of a predator playing with prey. Let's be merciful. For now. The tension in the ballroom crackled like electricity before a lightning strike. Garrett's face contorted with desperation, with the dawning horror of a man watching his world collapse. He straightened, trying to summon the alpha authority that had ruled for 3 decades. Guards. His voice boomed across the space. These creatures have infiltrated under false pretenses. Seize them. Not a single guard moved. They stood frozen, bodies rigid, eyes wide with the terror of wolves caught between impossible commands. That's an alpha command. Garrett roared, his aura flaring weakly. Obey me. Kale stepped back, shaking his head, his face twisted with anguish. I can't, Alpha. My wolf won't let me. It's not possible. Other wolves murmured agreement, their voices rising in a chorus of confusion and fear. Can't fight them. Something's wrong. There, more. Sarah's voice suddenly filled every mind in the room simultaneously, not spoken aloud, but projected directly into consciousness with the precision of a silver blade. You can't obey him because your wolves recognize superior alpha genetics. Biology doesn't care about your loyalty or his commands. Luna spoke aloud, her voice carrying the dangerous grace of a predator explaining the food chain to prey. We're not just wolves. We're evolution. Your instincts know we're apex. They're screaming at you to submit because that's what survival looks like. Damon added smoothly, for 20 years, I've studied your kind's pack dynamics with scientific precision. Alpha authority is pheromone-based, rooted in genetic hierarchy. Your daughters inherited your alpha blood, Garrett, then I amplified it through vampire enhancement. He smiled coldly. You created your own obsolescence. Lena's voice cut through, cold as the winter that had nearly killed her. You threw away the strongest heirs your pack could ever have. Because they were female. Elder Mara stepped into the center of the room, her ancient bones carrying her forward with purpose. She raised both hands, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of sacred tradition. By ancient right, I invoke the law of blood betrayal. Gasps rippled through the assembled wolves. This was old magic, older than the pack itself, rarely invoked because its consequences were absolute. Alpha Garrett Stone attempted infanticide on his own offspring, Mara declared. He severed the mate bond through gender prejudice. He banished his Luna without council vote, without trial, without mercy. I followed tradition. Garrett shouted. The law demands male heirs. The law demands worthy heirs, Mara corrected, her eyes blazing. You decided worth based on genitals, not genetics. You chose prejudice over power. She turned to Lena, bowing her head. By blood law, you have right of challenge, Lena. Do you invoke it? Lena stepped forward, away from Damon, away from her daughters. This moment belonged to her alone. She descended into the center of the ballroom, and every eye followed her movement. I invoke challenge right, she said, her voice ringing clear. Garrett Stone, I name you betrayer of blood. You sentenced innocence to death. You abandoned your mate. You broke sacred bond. She stopped, letting the silence stretch. I challenge you. Not for territory. Not for pack. For justice. Garrett's laugh was bitter, edged with hysteria. You? An Omega? You have no wolf strong enough to challenge me. Luna's laughter cut across his sharp, cruel, utterly without mercy. She doesn't need to fight you. We will. Sarah added quietly, consider a daughter's revenge. I won't fight females, Garrett spat. It's beneath an alpha. Luna's eyes flashed gold crimson, and the temperature dropped. You don't have a choice. The wolves moved without being asked, pushing furniture back, creating the ancient challenge circle. Damon took Lena's hand, his grip gentle but his eyes concerned. Are you certain? They could kill him. He tried to kill them first, Lena said softly. This is balance. Garrett shifted, his bones cracking and reforming. The massive brown wolf that emerged was scarred, battle-worn, carrying decades of dominance in every line of his body. He was huge, a testament to alpha genetics and brutal experience. Luna remained in human form, examining her nails with bored interest. Let me try without shifting. more sporting. Garrett lunged with alpha speed, jaws aimed for her throat, a killing strike honed by years of combat. Luna simply sidestepped, moved with vampire velocity that made her a blur. As Garrett's momentum carried him past, she grabbed his scruff mid-lunge and used his own force against him, slamming him into the marble floor with devastating strength. Crack! The tiles shattered beneath the impact. Garrett yelped, a high-pitched sound of shock and pain, and scrambled to his paws, circling her with new wariness. "What are you?" Luna smiled, and it was the smile of a creature that had never known fear. "Your daughter. Your mistake. Your doom." He attacked again, feinting left before diving right, claws extended for her hamstring. Luna jumped impossibly high, executing a perfect backflip that carried her over his head. She landed behind him and kicked superhuman strength concentrated in a single blow that sent him flying across the room. He crashed into the wall, sliding down, ribs clearly broken from the impact. "She's not even trying," someone whispered. "She's toying with him." Garrett shifted back to human, gasping, clutching his side. "Fine. You want me to acknowledge it? You're strong. You win. I submit." Luna walked over slowly, predator approaching wounded prey. "No. You don't submit to me." She grabbed him by the throat, lifting him one-handed until his feet dangled above the floor. "You apologize to our mother. On your knees." She dropped him. Garrett collapsed, and before he could rise, Sarah stepped forward. She didn't threaten, didn't crack her knuckles or make any aggressive move. She simply looked at him, and her eyes went silver-white, glowing with psychic power. Garrett's scream tore through the ballroom. He clutched his head, nails digging into his scalp as Sarah projected his guilt directly into his consciousness. He saw it, the night of the banishment, Lena's desperate pleas, the baby's cries, his own cold rejection. He felt it, the killing frost seeping into bones, the hypothermia stealing consciousness, the terror of dying alone. He experienced it, infant confusion, hunger, the darkness closing in. Sarah's voice echoed in his mind, inescapable. "This is what you did. Feel it. Stop." Garrett sobbed, tears streaming down his face. "Please. I'm sorry. I didn't know." Sarah released him from the psychic hold. He collapsed fully, broken and weeping. She knelt beside him, her voice clinically detached. "You didn't know because you didn't care. You saw female and decided we were worthless." She tilted her head. "But we're not worthless. We're gods compared to you." Lena descended into the circle, her footsteps the only sound in the frozen ballroom. Garrett looked up at her through tears, reaching out with trembling hands. "Lena, please. I was wrong. I was foolish. Forgive me." Lena looked down at him for a long moment. "Forgive you." She seemed to consider it, then shook her head slowly. "No. Forgiveness is for mistakes. You made a choice." She looked around the room, at every wolf watching. "You told me that if my daughters were strong, they'd survive the snow. If they were weak, nature would take them." Her eyes returned to Garrett. "They survived. They're the strongest wolves in this room." She leaned down, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner. "Now let's test your strength." Lena stood in the center of the ballroom, her voice carrying the absolute authority of Luna power awakened after 20 years of dormancy. "Garrett Stone, by blood law and Luna right, I strip you of your alpha title. I sever any remaining pack bonds you hold. I banish you from Shadowpine territory." "You can't." Garrett's voice cracked with desperation. "I built this pack. I've led for 30 years. Lena's expression didn't change. "And in one night, you destroyed it. You've been a corpse ruling corpses ever since." Kale stepped forward first, his jaw set with resolve. He slammed his fist against his chest, the traditional loyalty oath, and his voice rang clear. "I renounce Alpha Garrett. I pledge to Luna Lena." One by one, wolves followed. The sound of fists striking chests created a drumbeat of revolution. I pledge to Lunalina. I renounce Garrett. Even Elena, Garrett's companion who had stood beside him at the top of the stairs, stepped forward and bowed her head. I pledge to the true Luna. Garrett watched his pack abandon him, his face contorting with rage and betrayal. Traitors. All of you. Elder Mara's voice cut through his protests. We're survivors, Garrett Stone. You're the traitor to your own blood. Lena closed her eyes, reaching deep inside for the Luna power that had lain dormant since the night of her rejection. Her daughter's presence beside her acted as catalyst, awakening what Garrett had tried to destroy. Golden light surrounded her, emanating from her skin like dawn breaking. Every wolf in the room felt it, the Luna authority activating, claiming the pack as hers. Every oath sworn to Garrett broke simultaneously. The mystical bonds that had connected him to his wolves snapped like overstretched threads. Garrett screamed, the sound raw and animal, as he felt what Lena had felt 20 years ago, but magnified 100-fold. It felt like being skinned alive, like having his soul stripped away layer by layer. The alpha power drained from him, leaving behind something hollow. Ordinary. Just a man with no pack, no authority, no magic. Guards who had once been Garrett's most loyal warriors grabbed his arms. He struggled weakly, but without his alpha strength, he was nothing against them. You gave me a thin hospital gown and bare feet, Lena said, her voice clinically detached. You get the same. They stripped his alpha regalia piece by piece. The fur cloak fell to the floor. The ceremonial belt was unbuckled and discarded. His boots were removed, leaving his feet bare against the cold marble. They left him in a simple tunic and pants, no winter gear, no protection against the killing cold outside. It's below freezing out there. Garrett's voice rose to a shriek. I'll die. Lena stepped closer, and when she spoke, she used his exact words from 20 years ago, each syllable precise and deliberate. If you're strong, you'll survive. If you're weak, let nature finish what I started. The guards began dragging Garrett toward the entrance. He fought, twisting in their grip, searching desperately for any sympathetic face in the crowd. Kale. Brother, please. Kale turned his back, shoulders rigid. Elena. She didn't even look, her eyes fixed on the floor. Someone. Anyone. I'm your alpha. Only silence answered him. The only sound was his bare feet dragging across the marble floor, leaving faint streaks. At the threshold, winter wind howled through the open doors. Snow had begun falling in heavy sheets, temperature plummeting. Garrett grabbed the door frame with both hands, his knuckles white. Lena, don't do this. I was wrong. I'll change. Give me another chance. Lena approached, her face carved from ice. You're right. You were wrong. She paused, letting hope flicker in his eyes before crushing it. But change requires time. And I'm not giving you any. She nodded to the guards. Remove him. They shoved hard. Garrett stumbled into the snow, falling to his knees. He scrambled up, turning back to see the entire pack watching from the warm, fire-lit ballroom. He saw his daughters, strangers who shared his blood, flanking their mother with predatory grace. He saw Damon lift a crown and place it on Lena's head, the official coronation of the Luna Queen. The heavy doors swung shut. The lock clicked with terrible finality. Clack. Garrett pounded on the door, his fists already going numb. Let me in. I'll freeze. No response. The wind picked up, the blizzard intensifying unnaturally, Sarah's psychic power manipulating the weather, making it worse. His thin clothes were soaked through in seconds. He tried to run, but didn't know which direction to go. The forest looked the same in every direction, darkness and snow and death. He fell into a snowdrift, struggled out, his movements already slowing. This isn't fair. I'm alpha. The words died as realization hit him like a physical blow. I'm nothing. His silhouette stumbled into the darkness, vanishing into the white oblivion exactly as Lena's had 20 years before. Inside the ballroom, Damon's voice rang with ancient authority. Let it be known, Lena Cross is sole authority of Shadowpine. Her daughters, Sarah and Luna, are my acknowledged heirs and yours. Shadowpine Pack is now under protection of the Night Court. An attack on these wolves is an attack on vampires. This is the convergence. 2 kingdoms, 1 rule. The wolves hesitated, the concept foreign and frightening. Then Elder Mara's voice rose, trembling with awe. The prophecy. It's fulfilled. Understanding rippled through the crowd. Wolves dropped to one knee, not in submission, but in respect. Kale's voice rang clear. We accept the convergence. Long live Lena. Long live the hybrid heirs. Rise. All of you. Lena's command was gentle but absolute. I'm not the Luna Garrett tried to make me. I don't rule through fear. I rule through strength. And I will make Shadowpine powerful again. She looked at her daughters. But first, my girls need to learn their heritage. Sarah's silver eyes gleamed. We've never run with a pack. Luna grinned, all predator. We've never hunted as wolves. Then tonight, Lena said, we hunt. Together. Pack and family. The transformation began. Lena shifted for the first time in 20 years, a gray wolf with silver-tipped fur that caught the firelight. Sarah became a white wolf with violet eyes, ethereal and haunting. Luna shifted into a platinum wolf with gold-crimson eyes, larger than any natural wolf, her vampire enhancement making her a creature of legend. The 3 she-wolves stood together, mother and daughters reclaiming their power. The pack shifted and joined them, and they raced through the side entrance into the forest, not the exile woods, but the hunting grounds, running toward life instead of death. Damon watched from the balcony, a satisfied smile on his ancient face. Sebastian appeared beside him. You achieved your goal, Majesty. The convergence is real. I achieved more than that, Damon said quietly, watching the wolves disappear into the trees. For 3,000 years, I've been alone. Now I understand what it means to belong. Hours later, the twins returned from the hunt, shifting back to human form, breathless and joyful. Lena followed, transforming as she climbed the stairs to where Damon waited. They looked out over the renewed packlands together. Regrets? Damon asked. Only that I didn't make him suffer longer. They laughed, dark but genuine. Thank you, Lena said. For saving us. For seeing us. Thank you for trusting me, Damon replied. For becoming the queen I didn't know I needed. They kissed, passionate and earned, sealing an alliance forged in snow and blood. Outside, far in the frozen forest, Garrett's body lay curled against a tree, half buried in snow. Frost formed on his eyelashes. A raven landed on a nearby branch, watching with intelligent eyes, nature's judgment made manifest. Lena's voice carried on the wind like a ghost. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But some people deserve to learn that lesson the hard way. In the cold. Alone. With nothing but their choices for company. Garrett Stone threw away his legacy the moment he valued gender over potential. He banished the mother of prophecy and the daughters who would bridge ancient enemies. Lena Cross survived exile, death, and transformation to become a queen who rewrites the rules. Her daughters didn't just survive, they evolved into the most powerful beings in both kingdoms. The convergence isn't just about vampire-werewolf alliance. It's about recognizing that strength comes in forms patriarchy refuses to see: maternal love, hybrid nature, female power. Garrett got exactly what he gave: cold justice in frozen darkness. What would you have done in Lena's position? Mercy or vengeance? Let me know in the comments. If this story of rejected mother turned sovereign gave you chills, smash that like button. Share with anyone who loves powerful redemption arcs. Subscribe for more dark fantasy romance. Thanks for watching, and remember, diamonds are only worthless to those who can't recognize them. See you in the next story.